It was the kind of night when even the moon seemed shy, hiding behind slow-moving clouds. The village slept under a blanket of silence, broken only by the low hum of crickets and the occasional sigh of the wind. But then, there came a sound. Footsteps. Not the steady, measured ones of a hunter returning from the bush, no. These were uneven, swaying, as though the feet were trying to remember where the ground was. From the far end of the sandy path, a figure emerged, head tilted, shoulders loose, moving as if the night belonged to him alone. In his right hand, a bottle caught what little moonlight there was, and in his eyes, well, even in the darkness, you could feel the warmth of the palm wine that had taken over his thinking. This man, was walking toward the one place in the village where footsteps did not wander without reason, the soldiers' barrack. The barrack stood like a sleeping crocodile, still on the outside, but ready to strike if disturbed. Its walls held not just soldiers, but rules sharper than machetes and memories heavier than stone. In the daytime, the barrack was already a place of order and watchful eyes. But at night it became something else entirely. Yet here was this man, swaying and humming to himself, heading straight for its gate as though he was walking to his own courtyard. His steps were not in a hurry, but they were certain, too certain for someone in his state. And I will tell you this, in our land, you can walk anywhere barefoot, but you do not walk into a soldier's home without knowing why. So I ask you, the one listening to my voice, if you saw a man like this, in the middle of the night, heading toward the soldier's gate, would you stop him, or would you follow quietly, to see what becomes of his journey? Choose your answer well, because by the time you hear how this night ends, you may wish you had chosen differently. In the heart of Kalo village, when the sun sank into the horizon and the sky turned the color of ripe mango, there was one man whose name always danced on people's lips, Boma. By the day, Boma's hands worked the river. He was a fisherman, his dugout canoe slicing through water as smooth as oil. His nets, woven with patience, often came back heavy with tilapia, catfish, and the occasional stubborn crab. The elders would say, if you eat fish in this village, thank Boma. But when night came, the river could not hold him. The water gave way to something far stronger, palm wine. And in the dim light of the village square, you could always find him, calabash in hand, laughing like the moon itself had told him a private joke. Boma's laugh, loud, rolling, full of mischief, was a sound that could chase away bad spirits. Children loved him for his stories, young men admired his fearlessness, older women, well, they shook their heads, half in disapproval, half in amusement. But with every calabash, his tongue loosened, and so did his grip on sense. And that night, the night the moon stood alone in a cloudless sky, Boma had drunk more than the palm trees themselves could bear. The gossip in the village had always been that Boma's drinking would one day lead him into trouble. But even the loudest gossips could not have guessed that his feet, unsteady and stubborn, would carry him toward the one place no villager dared to wander after dark, the soldiers' barrack. And here's the thing, he didn't go there by accident. Tell me, if you had seen him that night, swaying like a palm tree in the wind, heading for the high walls and silent shadows of the barrack, would you have called out to him? Would you have followed? Or would you, like most, close your door and pretend you saw nothing? Because sometimes, the line between curiosity and danger is as thin as a spider's web. The moon was high, but it wasn't full. Its pale light fell over the dirt path, breaking into patches of silver and shadow. Beyond the last cluster of huts, where the sound of crickets ruled the night, there stood a place every child in the village knew and feared. The soldiers' barrack. It wasn't like the rest of the village. No laughter spilled from its walls, no smell of cooking fires or sound of children playing. Instead, it was a place of straight lines and straight faces, where a single careless step could change a man's life. Even the air was different there. It carried the scent of gun oil and dust, a smell that meant order, discipline, and danger. The elders used to say, a drunk man who walks into a soldier's shadow walks out a different man, if he walks out at all. And tonight, Boma was heading straight toward that shadow. But before he stepped onto that forbidden ground, there was something else, something the rest of the village would whisper about for years after. Hours earlier, before the first calabash of palm wine touched his lips, Boma had been with his family. Boma had cousins who loved him dearly, but they were tired. Tired of seeing him stumble home late, tired of watching the once strong fisherman become the evening's entertainment in the palm wine tapas hut. His cousin Kem, the eldest and most outspoken, had confronted him that very night. Boma, she said, arms folded, you think life will always wait for you. You drink today, you laugh tomorrow, but one day, laughter will not find you again. Boma only chuckled, waving her words away. You worry too much. I know my limits. But even his younger cousin, Chike, barely 17, had stepped in, speaking with a voice that trembled but still carried weight. Brother, one day your feet will carry you to a place your mouth cannot save you from. Those words would echo in the minds of everyone who remembered that night. Back at the Barrack, the world was different. The gates loomed high, and inside, life was measured in drills, in commands shouted before the sun rose, in punishments that left no space for excuses. Even the bravest market men would lower their voices when passing. Not because the soldiers were cruel, but because they were powerful, unpredictable, and bound by rules outsiders could never fully understand. To the village, the Barrack was like a sleeping lion. It might not be looking at you, but you never dared to poke it. And yet, that night, with the moon high and the crickets singing, Boma was about to do just that. And here's the question. Was it the palm wine that guided his feet, or something else entirely? Because some say, and they still say it today, that no man walks into a soldier's barrack by accident. The moon hung low over the village, a pale witness to the foolishness about to unfold. Boma's steps were uneven, his shadow swaying on the red clay road like a drunk spirit trying to keep up with its master. Ahead, the soldier's barrack stood like a sleeping beast, silent, but ready to roar if disturbed. Its iron gates were tall, unwelcoming, and cold. They weren't just metal and bolts, they were a boundary between freedom and a place no man in the village ever wished to enter. Still, Boma kept walking. The crunch of gravel under his worn sandals echoed in the night. From a distance, the guards had already spotted him, two men in faded green uniforms, their rifles resting against their chests, as sharp as the edge of a machete. One guard shifted his stance. The other raised a hand, palm forward. A voice cut through the night air, firm and low. Who goes there? Boma stopped, or at least, he tried to. His right foot obeyed, his left took one more step, then he stumbled into stillness. He squinted at them, as if their shapes were still forming in his mind. Then, a grin. Oh, my brothers in green. I have come to visit your fine palace. The guards exchanged a glance. Not the kind of glance that said friend, but the kind that said trouble has arrived. One of them stepped forward. His boots pressed deep into the dirt with each slow step. The air between them seemed to tighten. In the village, there were rules. You never touched a chief's staff without permission. You never crossed the river at night. And you never, ever, argued with a soldier guarding the gate after dark. But Boma, he was not a man of rules. He was a man of palm wine, stories, and bad timing. He chuckled again, swaying slightly. The guard's shadow fell across him like a warning. Go home. Now. For a moment, it seemed Boma might obey. He turned halfway toward the village, then stopped. a smirk spread across his face. "But my cousin told me, you people have meat cooking inside. And you know, palm wine tastes better with meat." The second guard's grip on his rifle tightened. In that moment, the night seemed to hold its breath. Even the crickets paused their song. Viewers, let me ask you this. If you were in bomber sandals, and two soldiers stood between you and a dangerous place, telling you to turn back, would you obey, or would curiosity push you forward? Because what Boma chose next would change the entire night. The Barrack swallowed him like the mouth of a sleeping beast. Behind him, the heavy wooden gate creaked shut, cutting away the warm night sounds of the village and replacing them with a thick, humming silence. Boma's footsteps echoed across the stone courtyard, unsteady, yet deliberate, like a fisherman walking the swaying deck of his canoe after one too many calabashes of palm wine. The soldiers watched him. Not with anger, not yet. But with that cold, unblinking stare men learn after years of guarding against threats they never speak about. One of them stepped forward. His shadow stretched across the ground until it touched Boma's feet. "Evening," Boma slurred with a grin that showed every tooth. "I hear this place has the strongest drink in the land, or is that just the smell of your boots?" The line hung in the air like a spear mid-flight. No one laughed. Instead, the soldiers exchanged a quick glance, the kind that carried more meaning than 100 words. A silent conversation. A decision being made in real time. Somewhere in the shadows, a metal latch clicked. Boma swayed a little but didn't lose his footing. "You all look so serious," he chuckled. "What's in those rooms you guard, eh? Palm wine? Or the chief's daughter hiding from her chores?" The air grew thicker. Not a single soldier moved. And that's when the feeling shifted, slowly, subtly. Not into open hostility, but into something colder. Like they were no longer seeing Boma the villager, but something else entirely. Something that didn't belong here, and wouldn't be living the same way it came in. I will ask you, the one listening right now, if you were Boma, standing there, grinning at men who would not grin back, hearing a door lock somewhere in the darkness, would you still keep joking? Or would you start looking for a way out? Because Boma didn't. Outside the Barrack walls, the village was no longer asleep. Word had spread faster than Harmattan wind. Boma went inside. At first, it was just two young men leaning on the fence, pretending they were there by accident. But curiosity in a small village grows like bushfire. Within minutes, the shadows of the onlookers stretched long and uneven across the dirt road. The moon sat low and swollen, casting a silver-blue wash over everything it touched. The fence posts glowed pale against the darkness, and behind them, the Barrack's outline rose like a black, sleeping animal. No one spoke loudly. This wasn't the time for noise. Instead, the villagers whispered, in tight circles, in half-breed sentences that died before they could be overheard. "He doesn't know what he's doing. They'll teach him a lesson. Or maybe he won't come out." The longer they stood there, the heavier the air felt. Even the ones who came only out of curiosity began to shift uneasily. Because everyone knew, when the Barrack gate swallowed a man, the village could do nothing but wait. And in that waiting, every small sound became a signal. A cough. A footstep. The creak of wood. The faint clink of metal from the other side. The onlookers didn't move closer, but they didn't leave either. They stood there, under the moon, under the silence, as if by watching, they might keep the night from turning worse. But the truth was, the night had already chosen its path. Inside the Barrack, the air smelled of sweat, metal, and kerosene. Boma stood just past the threshold, his hands loose at his sides, his head tilted in that way he had, halfway between arrogance and curiosity. A soldier by the door kept his rifle slung low but never took his eyes off him. Then, from the far end of the room, another soldier looked up from an oil-stained table. For a moment, his eyes narrowed, studying the man who had just walked in. Recognition hit him like a silent strike. His brows lifted. His mouth twitched. And without thinking, he leaned toward the man beside him. The whisper was short. Sharp. The second soldier's head snapped toward Boma, his expression tightening. From the corner of the room, someone muttered under their breath, just loud enough for those close to hear. "That's the chief's younger brother." The words rolled through the barrack like an invisible wave. Every soldier within earshot now looked at him differently. No longer just a man who wandered in, but a man whose bloodline carried weight and risk. Outside, the crowd could not hear what was said, but they felt the shift too. Through the fence, they saw the soldier's posture stiffen. They saw Boma's gaze flicker, as if reading the change but refusing to step back. Inside, one soldier leaned forward and spoke, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. "You should not be here, Boma." The name, spoken aloud, sealed the truth. They knew him. And now the stakes were no longer about one man stepping into the wrong place. They were about what would happen if the chief's own blood left this barrack in the wrong condition, or didn't leave at all. The name Boma did more than identify a man that night. It tore open a wound that had been festering for years. Long before this night, before the barracks stood where they stood now, there had been land. Land the chief claimed belonged to the village, and land the soldiers claimed was theirs by the order of men far away, wearing stars on their shoulders. The dispute had been bitter. Meetings under the hot sun had ended in slammed fists and turned backs. At one point, soldiers marched into the fields with their boots trampling the young crops, a message, not an accident. The chief's men had answered by blocking the supply trucks, forcing the soldiers to walk miles for water. It was a quiet war. No bullets, no official battles. But everyone in the village knew which lines not to cross, and which names carried the weight of that bitterness. And Boma, though younger, quieter, had stood beside his brother during those tense days. He wasn't the fighter, not then. But the soldiers remembered his face. They remembered the stubborn way he had refused to step aside when their trucks came through. They remembered the day one soldier had shoved him, and Boma had just stared back, not moving, not blinking. Inside the barrack now, those memories burned fresh. They were written in the tight grips on rifle stocks, in the slight narrowing of eyes. No one spoke of the land that night, but the air between them was thick with it. The soldiers didn't just see the chief's younger brother, they saw the man who had once stood in their way, a reminder of their humiliation. And under that silence lay something darker. An unspoken truth that the villagers outside feared. Old grudges don't stay buried. Sometimes they wait. They wait for nights exactly like this, when the wrong man walks into the wrong place, and no one can hear what happens next. From the outside, it looked like a tense standoff, a chief's brother and a group of armed soldiers, history and hostility hanging in the air. But there was something no one outside that room could see. In Boma's left hand, the one he kept close to his side, was a small, folded piece of cloth. At first glance, it looked harmless. Just a faded square of fabric, the kind a farmer might use to wipe sweat from his brow. But inside that cloth was a letter. It wasn't sealed in an envelope. The edges of the paper were worn, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. And across the front, in bold handwriting, was a name that belonged to one of the soldiers standing only a few feet away. No one in the room seemed to notice at first. The rifles, the memories, the heavy silence, they were enough to hold everyone's focus. But when the soldier with that name on the letter shifted his weight, his eyes dropped briefly to Boma's hand. And in that instant, something changed in his expression. Was it recognition? Was it fear? Or something more complicated, the kind of look a man gives when he sees a ghost from a part of his life he's tried to bury? The room seemed to tighten around them. The other soldiers didn't notice, but for those two men, Boma and the letter's recipient, the air became different. Charged. Private. The crowd outside had no idea. They only saw shadows through the thin curtains and heard the occasional scrape of boots on the wooden floor. But if they could have seen that folded cloth, if they could have read what was inside, they might have realized this night wasn't about old grudges alone. Was Boma sent here with that letter on purpose? Was this a mission for someone else, a quiet delivery wrapped in the cover of confrontation? Or did he come on his own, carrying a message he knew could change everything? The truth of that letter would remain sealed, at least for now. But it planted a question that would echo long after this night ended. Do you think he was sent, or did he come on his own? In villages like this, nothing happens by accident. If a chief sends his own brother, and that brother arrives drunk, clutching a secret letter for the soldiers, it is not clumsiness. It is a message. And the message is not meant for the ears of the village alone. It means trust is gone. It means words spoken in daylight can no longer be believed in the dark. It means the bridge between the chief's stool and the state's uniform has rotted, and everyone is pretending they can still walk across. In our lands, the elders say, when the drums change rhythm, the dancers must change their steps. But here, the dancers are still moving to old beats, even as the drums sound like war. The chief knows his brother's weaknesses, the drink, the temper, the loose tongue. To use him anyway means this was never about safety. It was about sending something that could not be ignored, even if it stumbled in on unsteady feet. And in this, there is danger. Because when leaders stop speaking plainly, they begin to speak through symbols. And when symbols replace speech, the people stop hearing the truth at all. The elders have another saying. A child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. If the chief believes the state has abandoned the people, then his brother's drunken arrival is the first spark. Small now, but sparks grow. This is how dangerous paths are paved, not with gunfire at first, but with quiet decisions. A letter instead of a handshake. A drunk instead of a diplomat. An unspoken challenge instead of peace. If we are wise, we will remember this night. For in the histories of nations, the worst roads are walked long before the first shot is fired. And when the road bends toward fire, the people will follow, whether they want to or not. Dawn comes softly, but not kindly. The mist hangs low over the village road, blurring the line between earth and sky. Birds call in the distance, but the sound feels thin, as if even nature is holding its breath. The soldiers do not speak. They simply step aside. And from the shadows within, a single figure emerges. It is Boma. Barefoot. No butter. No letter. His eyes are not red with drink anymore, but something in them is gone. The swagger, the clumsy laughter, all stripped away. What remains is a man who looks like he has seen the inside of something he wishes he could forget. The villagers are waiting, a silent line on both sides of the road. An old woman steps forward first, her voice trembling. What happened inside? No answer. A boy, barely 12, calls out. Where's the chief's letter? Still nothing. Boma keeps walking, past the market stalls, past the curious eyes, his gaze fixed on the ground as if afraid the dust might accuse him. In villages like this, silence is not empty. It is heavy. It is loaded. And that morning, the silence weighed more than any words could. When a man walks into danger, it is not always madness. Sometimes, it is a message. Sometimes, it is a hand reaching into the fire so others can see how hot the coals truly are. We may never know what words were exchanged behind those gates. We may never know if the letter was read, torn, or locked away in a drawer no one will ever open. But we know this: the soldiers saw Boma. The chief sent Boma. And the village watched Boma return. In every community, there are those who speak loud, and those who speak without a single word. Boma's walk that night might have been foolish. It might have been reckless. But sometimes, the line between foolishness and courage is so thin, only history decides where a man stands. So I ask you, was Boma a fool, or the bravest man in the village? As the elders say, the path is never too dangerous for the one who walks with the truth.